Blake, what's the most embarrassing moment your parents ever subjected you to?
Have I ever told you about the time I got an ass whooping right after I got baptized?
Welcome to the Church Gear Podcast, where we pull the tech out of the booth and onto the stage to share the most outlandish stories and hidden wisdom from the tech trenches. And now, here are your hosts.
I'm your host, Blake Hodges, a man who literally had to get baptized a second time after I got in trouble with my first one. And I'm here with my co-host who has never gotten a whooping in his life, and it shows, Toby Walters. It shows, Mr. Walters.
How old were you when this happened?
Okay, so...
Don't go into the story because I am fascinated by this, and I think this should be another future story.
It should. Let's just say, I want to say I'm in second or fourth grade, and this was back when the Mind calendar was going to end, and I thought, I got to get saved and punch my ticket real fast. So they took me to...
2012 was coming?
Yes. I literally went to a graduation that... I realized I would graduate in 2012, but I'm a young kid. Then I looked at the Mayan calendar, then I got baptized, and I got my butt whooped. That's how that fear progressed.
Okay. Well, I'm fascinated to hear the story in a future episode. So this will give our millions of listeners yet another reason to tune back in, since, we give them so many other reasons.
Yeah, they call that a tease, but it wasn't a tease me getting hit. It was quite painful.
So it was very recently the holidays, and as most of us do, we go, except for you, Blake, who are actually from the Nashville area, so you don't have to go home for the holidays. You were home for the holidays.
Yes, except we went to go visit my in-laws, and everyone got sick, so we all sequestered. It was quite a time.
Fun.
So you went home, though?
Yes, I went back to San Diego area, and I always specify that I'm not from the nice parts of San Diego. I'm from the inland... meh parts of San Diego.
The meh stands for meth lab.
Yes, I did have a literal meth lab next door to me growing up, so that was fun. And I was just, it's always fun to kind of reminisce about your childhood, like you're put back into your childhood memories, like by location. And so I was thinking of just some of the embarrassing moments, because Blake, you've met my parents, especially my father.
I have. He's a good man.
And so you can understand, I probably had a lot of embarrassing moments growing up. And so I thought I'd just recap on a few of these things. So number one, my dad had a very minor, and I stress minor, music career in the church, church world. And so one of the things he did is he would bring the whole family up on stage to sing with him as part of his set when he would travel to these churches. And I was something like 3 years old when he would do this. So my siblings were much older. They'd get up there and they'd participate in the song. My mom would sing in it, and I'd stand up there. And I don't remember any of this because I was like 3 years old. They said I would stand there with one hand, finger up my nose, and the other one holding my crotch.
And you're 3 years old at this point?
Yes.
Well, then it's totally forgivable. This isn't your fault.
I feel like that's very embarrassing for me to have to be drawn into this ridiculous family moment.
This is bad parenting, Mr. Walters.
And so eventually when I got older and they wanted to do like a family sing and I was running sound at that point, I said, okay, you guys go ahead. I'll be at the sound booth in the back. And so that was me. And, I've worked to distance myself from my family as much as possible because I feel like, I'm not embarrassing, but they are. You get that right,
Yeah,
Blake?
You're the coolest one. You had to move all the way out here.
And there was another moment when I was in high school and there was... Blake, do you know what the news is like on TV? Have you ever watched the news on TV?
What are you talking about, Toby?
Yeah, exactly.
Is this where you get your YouTube content from?
So there was a kind of a teaser for the newscast coming out that night, and it had something called an editorial. And it was an editorial about the effects of parents making fun of their children on their well-being. And so I turned to my dad. My dad was sitting behind me in the same room, and I turned to him and I say, "Yeah, Dad." And he looks back at me and he says, "Shut up, fat boy."
Wait a minute. And you say that to me all the time. So you learned it from him.
I learned it from watching him. And I was just reminded of this. So my wife and I grew up in the same town, same community, literally 2 miles apart our whole lives. We didn't know each other until we met after college. But we have so many of the same kind of shared memories because we were from the same place. So she grew up in a neighborhood that right outside the neighborhood was this kind of dead end and a little park right there. And at this park was this small collection of like boulders.
Oh no, I know where this is going.
And
a dead end with a place to hide.
So this collection of boulders at the park was literally just across the street from her neighborhood, but she was not allowed to go because rumor was that that was where the rebel high school kids did drugs and had sex.
The rebel high school kids. What is this, a dystopian movie where like there's factions?
So she said growing up, she was not allowed to go to the rocks because that's where bad kids misbehaved. And so I realized, wait a second, I was allowed to go to those rocks. I actually went to those rocks with my parents because my mom wanted to take a picture of my dad's quilts staged on the rocks. And I had to go along and stand there while my parents took pictures of quilts.
Did you ever look in the corners of those photos and see any teenagers looking up like, oh my gosh, we're getting caught?
I'm just imagining my wife, like, riding her bike around the neighborhood, looking over like, ooh, is that the bet? Oh no, that's just some dork with his parents who are taking pictures of quilts.
Gracious.
Can you imagine growing up with such embarrassing parents, Blake?
I can't, because my parents are the coolest parents ever in the whole world. The only parent that is cooler than them is presently sitting with us, a front of house legend, funny guy, overall best dude in the church production space, plus best one at making some coffee.
And quilter?
Let's find out.
Well,
Gene Kim. Gene, can you quilt us something?
no, absolutely not. That's not what I do.
Not even like to save your life?
I would die.
Do you say sometimes you quilt a beautiful tapestry of sound?
No.
At
that would
your,
be very generous for what I do. Yeah, that's not it.
And have you ever heard of a male quilter before?
No, that would be a first for
Yeah.
me.
Nor have most people, but I'm willing to oust my dad right now. He is a full-on male quilter and was actually featured in quilting magazines as one of the few in America male quilters.
He's a male quilter and a childhood bully to his own children. Calling you. Gene, did you guys have the rocks back when you grew up? Do you have any place where y'all did your mischief?
Well, we had a place, it was called, it's called Webb Park in my neighborhood where we grew up. And I realized that because my mom saw skateboarders skating at Webb Park. And now that I've grown up and I still live in the area, I realized, it's just a posh neighborhood park next to like some commercial buildings. And you thought they were bad kids, but actually they were just upper middle class spoiled brats.
This was such like Southern California growing up in the 80s. Like skateboarding was a huge subculture there, but conservative parents were like, you can't go to the park and skateboard because that's where bad kids go.
That's where you do drugs.
Yep.
Man, well, speaking of things that send you to hell, lying is one of them, and we don't want you to go to hell. So we're going to skip the 5 truths and a lie today. Also, because Gene's a repeat guest, he's already earned his stripes there. We will do a fun coffee game at the end, though, where I pit the two of you together for a surprise coffee trivia, which now I realize isn't a surprise, but it'll be fun.
I hope to fail miserably for you guys.
Yeah, that'd be funny if I beat him on the coffee thing.
I would love that.
Yeah.
I would actually put money that you would.
Gene, listen, for my overall work happiness, I need us to downplay Toby's ego, not up it. So let's just get right into it.
Okay. So Gene, we've had you on before. Has it been about a year, Blake?
I think it's literally been like a year and 6 months because I was looking it up for this.
Okay. So one of our legends, apparently, that we love you so much, we brought you on twice. So what has Gene Kim been up to over the last year and a half? Like, what are some of the tours you've been involved with?
If it helps at all, it was September 2022.
No, it
that
doesn't.
gives you, okay.
That's not how old people's brains work. It doesn't help at all. Let's see, 23. Oh, sorry. I should know better as an audio professional.
If it helps, he sounds great in my ears. I'm wearing headphones. Toby's not because Toby's too cool for headphones.
I am.
Yeah, so last year, spent the first half doing Phil Wickham's sing-along tour. So I did a lot of that. I filled in some for friends. It's kind of like a small community. So you just kind of like sit in people's chair when they can't be out. So I did that. And then second half, I was with Johnny Swim and finished the year out. And then just working.
Yeah.
I'm just happy to be working, to be honest.
And Phil's sing-along tour is like him and a guitar,
Yeah. So
Really?
I think it's my third one, and they're really fun. But this year it was Leland and Matt Marr and Phil, and just acoustic guitars.
So
And
is it easier as a front of house engineer if it's just him and a guitar? Or does it?
Or is it
Almost
harder
make
because
it
there's
harder.
nothing to hide behind?
Yeah, it's easier in the sense of like building the stage and getting it pinned and getting ready for sound check is like a lot shorter, but also at the same time, like, these are the same size rooms. And so to make like an acoustic guitar sound as big as a drum kit can get a little challenging. So you do weird things like, put them into subwoofers and do a bunch of things that kind of normally you don't do.
Yeah.
So to kind of get to like that, like 95 to 100, on some bigger moments, like it gets challenging, but it's also really fun because it's so like midweek Bible study fellowship, like campfire-y vibe, and so kind of at least my like earliest moments of like worship, it just kind of like revisits all that. So it's awesome.
And do you get paid per input? So he's like, you get 2 100ths of
I
what you
would
normally
work for an orchestra if that were the case.
See, I get paid by input. That's why I have a lot of input. I
Yeah.
say a lot of opinions.
Yeah.
I just have to say, you guys are really good at this podcasting thing. I'm feeling very nervous and out of place.
No, Gene, remember I told you have to downplay Toby's ego. Tell him he's the worst podcaster you've ever met in your life.
I've seen a lot of hosts, but this one, guys, is just falling short.
Oh, no. Well, it's a tough chair to sit in. And speaking of chairs, you talked about how you would sit in your buddies' chairs or they'd sit in yours whenever you'd be out. What's the kind of pressure of that, or anything to tell of when it's like, oh, I'm being invited to sit in someone's chair for a time?
Yeah. I think like what's changed in kind of the church or even touring community is, and it's especially prevalent in Nashville, where you get this sense of like people are rooting for you and they want you to do well. They're putting their friends on jobs and they're recommending people for work. And it's not always like that in other parts of the country. But when when your friend asks like, hey, can you sub for me? Or I can't make these run of shows. You feel like a great responsibility, and what you want to do. And this is what I appreciate of even people that fill in for me is just the feeling of they're not there to, they just want to honor what you do and just kind of like support the people that they usually serve and work for and just not create any waves, like in the past, engineers would be like, well, I'm going to use my own file, or, oh, I don't do it like that. And they kind of throw the, previous engineer under the bus. And I think a lot has changed in terms of how people sub for each other. And, even some of the churches that have guests from time to time, it's, I did a couple weekends at Passion City at the beginning of the year, just filling in and, kind of the idea of just, you're just there to serve that team and, you want to use their template and you want to use their workflow and you want to use what's been established there. So yeah, I just think like in the last couple of years, like we all know who each other are. We're all friends or colleagues and it's changed. I think it's awesome. Yeah. I feel like Church Gear, Mike Reynolds, MXU, Philo, all these, you guys, like it's what's changed it, to be honest.
That's awesome. One quick question that came to mind. Is there any artist specifically that you're like, when I jump in there, it makes me itch just because like their mix is the craziest thing I've ever seen? Like who's the most stressful to mix for just because of what they're trying to pull off?
It's not an artist, but one of the weekends that I was at Passion City is they tied all the churches together. And so they're, host pastors and bands are talking to each campus live. And even for some moments, like one campus's band is playing with another in real time. And so you're getting like a string section submix from one campus, and then you're integrating it with, vocalists at your campus. And I've never done anything like that. I was like, wow, this is like the line check before that service is serious. And I was like, this is what you guys just do like on a normal week to week basis. Like it's no big deal. And I'm like, hats off to you because that was stressful.
It's funny how we've had that conversation with the Passion guys about trying to pull off the vision of the Passion, of Louis Giglio and the rest of the creative team. And yeah, the stuff that they aim for is next level. It's wild.
I mean, that tells you how smart Stephen Bailey is.
Yeah.
Truly. That guy is it.
Oh no, he we got to have him on the pod recently. This will have come out after that. Yes. Yeah, no, he was super smart. He started nerding out on this one thing, and me and Toby were looking at each other, and we were like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah,
I kind of knew what it meant in theory.
No, you didn't.
And then
you're fronting.
And you had, two polar bears playing badminton in your head. You just go to your happy place, Blake.
I love that you think my happy place is that and not swimming in white cheddar popcorn like the Uncle Duck did in the gold coins back on Disney.
So Gene, you end up in a lot of different rooms, a lot of different churches. You see a lot of different things. Are there like specific trends that you're noticing that you like or don't like?
Gosh. I just feel like I'm, in front of PAs that are 20 years old and 3 months old. And so it just you just kind of see it all. I don't know about trends. At least specific to kind of like the church production world, it's nice to see just this slow creeping movement towards like engineers, like being aware of their health. I know it's not about speakers and gear ecosystems and things like that, but I'm just noticing like normally when you visit a church, it's like an all hands on deck situation, like a tour is coming by and it's an event and, everyone would be there. And now it's kind of like, well, so-and-so took it off and, we can't do that because so-and-so's not here because, they worked already X amount of this hours, this week, or they're on vacation. And I don't know. I just think this thing towards healthier engineers is like, what I'm noticing the most, or I'm seeing churches that are staffing more appropriately, to be honest, where you see, not just like the full-time person, or maybe you see a part-time person, but you're also seeing like the interns and then like a handful of like younger people that are obviously there to learn and kind of grow. So I don't know. That makes me happy as an old guy.
And you kind of talking about like a healthy balance in everything where they're not, working 90 hours a week and
right,
crazy insanity.
And I'm just seeing just a movement towards health and balance and work-life balance and being there for your family. And, on the other side, it's also like the amount of learning and the amount of resources that people like. I'm also startled at what people know when I come into a building. Like a 22-year-old is like, just miles and miles beyond anything I was even aware of at their age, So
yeah.
It's awesome.
It's so true at Church Gear. And Blake, you're kind of the anomaly because you're kind of like right in the middle age range of Church Gear. But like the younger the people at Church Gear are, I feel like the smarter they are. Just like the most brilliant people in our company are mostly the youngest people here.
And then you got the olds, which Toby's in there. And then I just teeter-totter between the two of them, saying hi.
Yeah. Those polar bears playing badminton in your head.
See, the joke that happened over the weekend was they're going to have the Utes all play a game where we see if we know the music of the olds.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, yeah, the Utes aren't going to know. And Kobe was on the Utes team, and she was like, no, I'm going to know. So I think I'm going to end up being the only one who doesn't.
Some people were taught well by their parents, other than you.
Look, I was too busy getting a whooping after a baptism, all right?
Gene, are there anything like when you go to different rooms, different churches, are there like specific pet peeves where you get there and you're like, oh no, not this situation again. Okay, let's work around it.
I don't know. I don't know if it's just who I work for but typically the posture of a tour visiting a church, we're very aware that there are things that happen in that room that have nothing to do with us being there. And so we're actually, at least our crews are just trying to be aware that, hey, like, especially if we're like a concert's on a Saturday, like you're very trying not to minimize the changeover that this group of folks have to do before Sunday morning. And so we're trying to minimize the impact. But as far as pet peeves, I don't know. I people are really kind when we're visiting. I work a lot. Just being with Phil, people are excited to see him, and we're not like coming in there like kicking down the door, trying to assert our,
Well, then maybe we change the question up a bit. Like instead of pet peeves, maybe is it like, hey, these are some things that it's really nice that when we walk in, like these 3 things are already done, or like I wasn't expecting it, and that was really cool.
Yeah, you just see like a clean stage, like you just see a clean stage, something so basic as that, or you arrive and they come meet you outside and say hi, and they welcome you in. Or they tell me where the good coffee is, because you just don't know, like where to go most of the time.
And I've met, and I know you've worked with other artists, but I've met Phil a couple times, and like he's, so nice, and you are very nice, and so, it's so wonderful to go to a church and have them just be nice in response. And some churches, like, they just don't think about it. Sometimes they're like, oh yeah, you're here. Okay. Well, I'll get back to you. They're just,
right.
It's almost like you're a nuisance a little bit, but
right. I mean, 2021, right when kind of like the pandemic was still kind of there, we were doing these shows where it was Phil, a guitar, me, his manager, and like we were just like in a SUV, like doing these church, like half capacity nights, worship nights. And we were so grateful, but as long as I've known him, even then, but I remember that season just because, before we would come into a church, like we would pray, like, help us to serve these people. And Phil, like, honestly, he says, like, we're here to serve this church body, this whoever is in here. And so in the same way, he's trying to encourage and serve, whether it's a senior pastor or worship pastor, like I look at it as like, I'm here to kind of bless the tech folks in that building if I can, however I can.
Yeah, I mean, is there anything in particular you find reoccurring happening when you're trying to bless the tech folks? I mean, I know it probably varies, church to church, but that's really cool.
Yeah, I just telling him like, the work's gonna be here tomorrow when you come back. You don't have to take it all home. And just be home more.
Yeah.
Like if I think a lot of church folks, they put a lot of pressure on themselves, like I have to do all this X amount of work. It's not going to get done unless I do it. And, I think especially now, I just think if you just ask your supervisor, hey, I'm cooked, or I could use a little break, or I'm like, I think people are just so understanding and empathetic to what a church tech does week in and week out. And then pragmatically speaking, I think like church techs, the shortage is so real. I think the supervisors know like, hey, like I got to take care of the people that I actually have, because it's not
replacing
the supply.
them.
Yeah, the supply is not enough to meet the demand.
Yeah. So you have a distinct advantage in the fact that you get to be in so many different churches and different rooms and see different setups and approaches. But so many of our listeners, like, they are full-time at their church. And so they have their head in, their project and their world. Right. And so, like, do you have any advice or thoughts on how they might, put their head up sometimes and see, like, I wonder how this church does it, and just gain some perspective on like, oh, I never thought of doing it that way, and bringing some of these things back home. Is it just conferences? Is it podcasts? Or maybe like getting out and actually visiting other churches?
Yeah, I think those are all like great advice. I think as it pertains to mixing in particular, there's a thing called console creep. It's kind of like you just kind of take it for granted that what you've programmed and what you have on your console is going to work next week. And then you have a little change, and then, you implement that change, but it doesn't really apply to the next week, but you didn't change anything, and it's a new year, kind of like the way you do spring cleaning, I think it's a good time to just kind of wipe the console, obviously you want to notate every in and out and where things are patched and all the things that are downstream of your console. But in the touring world, every tour, every run of shows is a new console file or a new console altogether. And that way you can kind of keep your mind fresh instead of being like, hey, like there's a new instrumentalist this week and that sounds familiar, so I'm going to put it down this signal path because that's what I've always done. Kind of from the touring side, what you do is on every record cycle, you're looking at all the new songs and all the new sounds that are on the album, and then you want to serve that well. So you're trying to kind of start from scratch. So I just think the pressure of having a good Sunday happen is so high that the actual bandwidth and ability to say, hey, Monday through Thursday, I'm going to wipe this thing and then I'm going to start over. But I do think it's really valid. Or maybe you roll it out over the course of a few weeks where you say, hey, I'm building a file. I'm going to still use, the one we've always been using, but I'm building a file, and every subsequent rehearsal and Sunday, it just gets tighter and tighter. And then, somehow your mixing kind of gets freshened up a little bit,
Yeah. Yeah, I think, a lot of audio guys can rely on their show file and just go back to it every single Sunday. And yeah, you lose some of that magic by not reimagining. Like, we forget it's art, it's creation. And so,
and especially for the guys that work for different folks, they kind of take it's easy to kind of take your template and then kind of adapt it to whoever you're working for. I kind of do something not advisable, but I change manufacturers of consoles just so that the fact that I just have to really feel a little bit dumb at the beginning when I'm kind of programming, so that it forces me to say, oh, how do they think about music? How do they think about, processing things? And then it forces you to do things you normally wouldn't, and then you get something new.
I'm imagining, Blake, a new TV series that we host. It's called, instead of like wife swap, it's console swap. So churches have to, trade their Digico for the Yamaha or whatnot.
That's great.
Oh, crap. How did I, assign this here on this? And
you're joking. Let's do this.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Let's do this.
We can't pull off all of my ideas, Blake. We've discovered this before. So
wait a minute. Nobody told me that. I'm still working 90 hours a week trying to do this stuff. Okay, Gene. We want you to imagine, a lot like how Toby imagines, imagine how you're suddenly part of a production team at a church. What would you want the most in the room to make it just the best audio possible? You're kind of getting ground floor. You get to make whatever requests. Don't worry about budget. Is it equipment? Is it leadership style? Is it culture? Is it just a bunch of D&B line arrays?
Where do you want to start to build upon?
If you're really getting to imagine your own room, because when you came on the last time, the thing that really hit was you giving that room hack. Yeah. I mean, that blew some people's minds.
Okay. I mean, I don't know if it's because I'm getting old and it's kind of the beginning of the year and you get a little reflective, you start thinking about things.
Gene, we're the same age, so if you're getting old, then so am I.
The difference is Gene is aging like wine and Toby's aging like mud.
I'm feeling old, yeah, for sure. I think when you get older, you're not motivated to do work that a young person is motivated to do. Kind of like the way to get me out of my house is not dangling something cool in front of my face. It's just kind of, those days are kind of long gone for me, and if I'm going to leave people I love, I got to be going to people I want to be around and love. I'm not trying to leave my wife and my kids to go tour with a bunch of not awesome people, And so going back to just the people side, like a great drummer that you love. I mean, that's just the foundation of things sounding great. Whoever's on stage, on the platform, you want a real relationship with them, and I think that's kind of how I've been fortunate enough to just choose the work I do is I want this real trust with that person, for them to really, trust what I'm doing, because stuff goes wrong, and you have bad nights and you have less than awesome moments, and, but if something sounds great or you want it to sound great, the relationship has to really be there. There's been a lot of cool jobs that I've just kind of politely said no to because just the people weren't a good fit for me, but I'm a little bit spoiled. But yeah, start with a great drummer. And maybe like an old Gretsch or Ludwig or Rogers kit, and all right.
Speaking of drummers, real quick, this weekend we were taking some photos for we needed some stock photos of hey, we're at a church, and their drummer guys gray hair just on the sides, no gray hair on top, skinny jeans,
Wow.
drummer. It was so cool. I was like, this dude has been rocking his whole life.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's a true drummer for you.
I've never been that cool, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't know.
Yeah, it's amazing just the effect that enjoying the people you work with has on the entire output. And I visited so many churches where like some of them just stand out where like, oh, you guys really have a good time.
You care about each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's when you can have hard conversations, or that's when you can laugh off something bad happening. You know, I tell this story. I was just telling this story. We did these during the sing-along tour. I was mousing over on my Waves plug-in rack, and the wireless mouse died because the battery and whatever it was glitching. And the 1K knob, where I should have just been attenuating, the ball just wheeled up, and all of a sudden you've got a bunch of feedback because it's plus 15 dB. And oh my gosh, my heart just,
you can feel it right now.
It's just not great, and it's this really somber moment, just people are really worshiping really tenderly, and I just felt awful, and I just, immediately after, I'm like, Phil, I'm so sorry. Like, this is what happened, and I'm so bummed, and he was just like, people worship tonight. Like, it was the sweet, like, he's like, what? I don't even know what you're talking about, and he knew. His ears are so good. He knew, but he was so gracious. And I think it's just a relationship, you've been working with someone for a long time, and you really love each other, and both people are thinking about serving the church and not about how they look or what they're doing, their job taking precedent over the moment, so to speak. And that's what helps you just move on and just start over the next day. But I use a wired mouse now. So
Yeah.
that's the hard lesson to learn.
It's just a small hack there.
Yeah, but use a wired trackball if you can.
How long have y'all been working together?
Off and on from about 2015. So, I was with him quite a bunch in the kind of closer to the 15, 16, 17, 18, those years. And then, but I've always, thankfully they've always been kind enough to just ask if I'm free when I can, So
Well, see, I'm just trying to gauge, that's 8 years. Me and Toby are at 3.5 now. So we just got another 4.5 years, Toby, before we love each other.
I'm going to for real fire you before that. That's for darn sure. My New Year's resolution is to fire you more, Blake. So
yeah.
Well, hang on. Is this officially counting for our tracker for the year?
You want it to?
Nope, I don't.
You're fired.
Dang it.
Yep.
Well, before I
Count that one.
Before I get fired, I do want to ask another question. I just want to harken back to that hacking of a room. Really, I just want to revisit it. Like, if we don't have anything else to say, like, that's totally fine. But any further thoughts on hacking a bad room? Any tips to our church tech pals that are listening to this on like, yeah, I'm stuck in this room, guys. Like, this is my room. Any changes or adjustments you like?
Yeah, I think that was in a case when a room is way too like reflective and acoustically just way too many bounciness. Just things are out of your hand. Kind of, for a lot of people, kind of like an outdoor flat space with no roof is kind of like an ideal because there's no reflections. Well, in that case, because we do a lot of this where, the first couple shows are inside, and then you take the same show file and you've got to be outside, and you sound check at 11 a.m. and then you play at 9 p.m. and a lot has changed. And so, a little thing of when you go outside is you've got to make things, you have to introduce decay. Otherwise, it just feels like sound just appears and then disappears because it has nowhere to kind of stay in the ballpark. So rather than just making all your reverbs really long, now you're introducing like a way to make it feel more natural is just add small amounts of delay on things, lengthen a pre-delay, instead of a 3-second verb, have two that are maybe 1.5 and 2. And so even now, I'm just using a little bit of soft compression on some of your reverb tails, kind of keep things in the ballpark. So you're trying to introduce a little bit of room compression in a place where there's none of it. So it's kind of like the opposite of adding reverb to a bouncy place.
Yeah.
I don't know if that made sense.
The fact that it didn't tells me that it was a great tip.
I mean, especially for the fact that like since COVID, so many churches in like California and Florida now have outdoor venues and they're doing a lot of outdoor services. So that'll be very helpful for those mix engineers. And I was thinking Blake's way of helping his engineer hack a room is that, so at my church, we're doing a church-wide fast for the first 3 weeks of the year, and they do it every year.
Toby's been real cranky, man. It's been hard.
But Blake does the opposite, where he's like, I'm just going to eat more and absorb more sound. So that's your hack to help your audio engineer. You absorb more of that sound.
I love that. That's my ministry, man. Now I'm going to start.
up.
I'm going to start writing off all this white cheddar popcorn.
You are a human bass trap
for a long time.
Gene,
I got one. Sorry.
Oh, hit it.
I think one thing you can do that is kind of undefeated is you could just mix quieter. If you just mix quieter, the room is less involved in your mix. I think some people feel like if I just push it harder, I can get on top of all the problems and it'll be so speakers will do enough work that it'll feel like I don't even hear the room. But I think, Sing Along is a good example with a couple guitars. You can really swing the dynamic range to go into the 80s, low 80s, and it kind of resets your ability to do other things later on as kind of the moment builds. But yeah, just mix a little quieter and it works.
Toby, I don't like this advice because if that means that I need to talk a little quieter, we're going to have problems.
Well, I always tell our audio guy if he can turn it up a little bit, I'd be happy.
That's true. Toby, are you trying to go deaf by 50 or 60?
I think I can make it to 60.
Think so? Okay.
Yeah. Gene, I know that you kind of have fun with technology and you like to throw out personal challenges of, I think you've said things like, I'd love to mix an entire tour on an X32 or an analog console.
Yeah.
Are there any specific directions you see technology going that you're like, I don't like that. I'm not a fan.
No, I'm a pretty big fan of where it's going. I think the software is getting so much better. The computers are getting more stable and more powerful. Manufacturers are being forced to put more feature sets and more capability into smaller, more compact, cheaper, more affordable things. And so it's all exciting to me. I love it. Although I did just ask a vendor if they had an old Heritage 3K or XL4. And they said, no, we don't have any analog consoles. I'm sorry. And I was like, I should probably cut back on YouTube.
And if they did, would you legit have taken it out?
Yeah, I would have really considered it.
Yeah.
I don't think I think there's one YouTube video that I watched recently, and it was about Stapleton's engineer, and he's got this beautiful Midas, and he was saying how he used to tune rooms with a turntable, and
wow.
I just couldn't even fathom that.
Yeah.
But knowing what those desks sound like, I get it, and there's not a single person that's seen a Stapleton show that won't say that's one of the best things they've ever heard. So.
Yeah.
And is AI going to take over all of mixing, or do you have no fears of that, or tons of fears of that?
No, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be a moment where a console is smart enough to start mixing, or at least get like a balance going pretty quickly. But I think at least for the first handful of years, it's going to be referred as like the golden age of AI, where kind of the relationship of humans and AI technology, you're getting like a bigger sum of effectiveness, And so the fact that, consoles are going to be able to, or are able to see inputs that, and just say, oh, would you like me to apply the acoustic guitar preset to that thing? And be like, great, and just sort it out for you. Or, I mean, some of these plugins where like someone's singing into a vocal mic and there's a vacuum, and then you just turn the knob and then you could just hear the vacuum go away. I'm just like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Or what if you're just like, can you make that drum sound like this drum sound? And it just happens. That sounds awesome to me.
I wonder if there's a plugin for the podcast where we turn a knob and Blake just goes away.
Yeah, they have that.
Because like a vacuum, he sucks.
You can just hit the mute button, Toby, but I don't think AI can be as random as me.
I'm currently reading Elon Musk's biography right now, and there's all sorts of fascinating things. He's a very interesting character on many different levels, but especially with Tesla, like starting in 2016, he kept saying fully automated self-driving cars are coming this year. And then the next year he'd say it. And the next year we'd say it. And finally he just sort of self-deprecating. He's like, yeah, I think I'm, thinking that's coming faster than it is. And, some of this technology is it's still decades away, even though we see the potential of it soon.
Yeah. And I do think, real human experiences become that much more valuable in a place where kind of the AI is the norm, it's I think concerts and events, seeing people, it just gets more, people are going to seek it out more,
Have y'all gotten an email yet where you're pretty sure someone wrote it to you through ChatGPT? It feels weird.
I haven't thought about it, but I do certainly understand what ChatGPT can do.
There was one email I got and I was like, you didn't write this to me. I don't know how I feel about that. So as you say, Gene,
yeah,
I don't know the term. There's a term for human error is what creates beauty in life. And I think you're going to lose some of that with AI that people will then go back to.
Yeah.
I don't know. Guys, should we talk about coffee?
Sure. I've got it in front of me right now. So
all right.
I'm a fan.
Let's do some coffee trivia with Gene and Toby. So here's how this is going to work. I've got 7 questions. You have to let me finish the question. It's not like our
Starbucks.
Yeah. And so obviously there's 7, so you're going to try to get 4 out of 7 right to win. The source for this is goodhousekeeping.com. All right, number 1.
And should we clarify that Gene is a coffee
Yeah, Gene, why don't you give us some of
manufacturer?
your coffee background?
Yeah.
Well, during the pandemic, I had a lot of time on my hands, and my wife gifted me a coffee roaster, and that just led to a lot of bean burning, and that's what I did for a good year and a half, and then I started doing these shows for Phil. Yes, we were coming out of the pandemic, and he's like, "Hey, what have you been up to?" Oh, I've been roasting coffee. Maybe someday it's going to be called Crew Brew. And I'm just telling you, he got so excited. He posted about it on Instagram and thinking this was going to be a real thing pretty soon. And I was thinking when I'm done touring and my ears don't work anymore, I'm going to roast Coke. And so I had, a few hundred messages kindly asking where to get this. And I wasn't busy, and I was like, I wonder how realistic it would be to fulfill orders. So I made a landing page, and I took orders, and that was maybe 2 years ago, but I had 150 orders, and I had never roasted more than half a pound of coffee at once.
Wow.
And so I had to really quickly figure it out. But I will say, just the support of you guys, MXU, Mike Reynolds, everyone's been so kind and supportive, and all your engineer friends, even though it tastes not awesome, they're like, this coffee's awesome,
Gene, I got to tell you, this false humility is not going to work on me. It doesn't not taste awesome. It tastes amazing. I know this because some of our boys that are here are coffee snobs, and they got it, and they lost it. It was I threw a pound of catnip into the pound, and all the cats tore it to pieces. I'm for real. I'm for real.
It's become a really fun thing. It makes no sense when you look at it in terms of time or finances, but it's just so fun and it's so interesting, and it's nice to have something that kind of exercises your brain. And then from a relational aspect, it's so nice to go somewhere and be like, I brought you some coffee, or production folks are like, this is our coffee, it's in a black bag, it looks like a road case label, so I don't know.
And is it crewbrew.com?
Crewbrew.com.
The traditional spelling?
That's right.
Okay.
Use the coupon code ChurchGear.
Ooh.
And you'll get some. It'll charge you more, but
great.
Yeah, that's for Blake.
Exactly.
It's an offering for him.
And you know what? We'll just say it right here that if you share this episode and tag us and Crew Brew on Instagram this week, somebody's getting a free bag of Crew Brew.
Yeah.
I'm getting a free bag of Crew Brew.
I will make sure
Am I
that
qualified?
Sure. I will
Blake, you're gonna have to show me how to use Instagram.
I will make sure that Toby doesn't win. Seriously, post this episode on Instagram, tag us both, and someone will win a free bag of Crew Brew.
Awesome.
All right. So let's do this coffee trivia. Gene, I'm bringing you in as my heavy gun to beat Toby here. Here we are.
Starbucks.
Toby, you have to let me
Dunkin'.
finish. Okay.
All right.
Number 1. How far back does coffee date back to? Guess a century.
I'll say the 9th century.
I don't know. The 5th century.
Dang it. It's the 800 AD. So I guess that's closest to 9th century.
I think that's literally the 9th century.
Is it?
Yes.
I'll have to. Oh, here we go. My explanation. Legend has it that 9th century goat herders.
Oh, man.
Oh,
Notice
Caldi.
Notice the effect caffeine had on their goats who appeared to dance after eating it.
Kicking your butt so far, Gene.
Well, I
Man.
knew it was going to happen.
I know.
But that's Caldi the goat farmer. That's the legend.
Yeah, apparently a local monk then made a drink with it and found that it kept him awake at night. Number 2, what country grows the most coffee in the world?
That's Brazil.
Boom.
Ah,
Brazil.
I was going to guess somewhere in Africa.
You want to guess the second placeholder?
Peru.
Colombia.
Vietnam. That one surprised me.
Wow.
So we got 1-1, Gene, Toby.
Okay.
Yes. Number 3, only 2 U.S. states grow coffee. What states are they? Only 2 United States grow coffee.
I'll say Georgia and Alabama.
California and Florida.
It goes to Gene because it's California and Hawaii.
Oh,
Hawaii.
Hawaii makes sense.
Whenever I was reading the article, it made it sound like whoever is making it in California is charging way too much for their beans. All
Probably.
right, 2-1. True or false? The most expensive coffee in the world costs $600, and it is made by a cat-like creature eating coffee beans that it can digest. And when it poops them out, the bitterness is downplayed.
True.
True. Kopi Luwak.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of a tie. All right, so 2-1
And
still.
it's terrible. It's not terrible. It's not great. I don't think it's great. I've also had the elephant poop coffee, which is also weird. I think so if I'm going to choose poop coffee, I think the elephant poop coffee is better than the rodent variety.
Interesting.
You just called cats a rodent. How dare you? So you drank both? Like it's a safe thing to drink?
It's a thing, yeah. Well, the idea is that the animal, this cat-like creature in the jungle, knows to pick the ripest, most ideal coffee fruit that has the sweetest, whatever. And then when it digests, the enzymes will create, lactic acid. So now you're hoping that this coffee has absorbed some of that and then becomes fruitier and more interesting. And I don't know.
Toby, I'd like to put a formal request or complaint into God for making Gene a genius at audio, coffee, and science.
I'm wondering if there's any cat feces in Crew Brew coffee.
Yeah, I should put a little label.
Disclaimer.
I'd be like, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Does not contain cat or elephant
Yeah.
feces. All right. True or false? Starbucks opens 2 stores a week.
Wow,
False.
That's impressive. If that's true.
Well, he answered first. It is false.
They open way more.
It's 2 stores a day.
At one point, I think they were open like 2 an hour.
I will say I have teenage daughters, and the street cred value of Starbucks to a teenage girl is so high. It's astonishing, to be honest.
They call it their Starbies nowadays.
Yeah.
All right, it's 2-2 now. And since we tied on one, y'all could tie overall. How many different combinations can you order Dunkin' coffee?
25.
Dunkin', they did the computation of how many different ways.
46,000.
Oh, it's got to be higher than that. It's got to be like 100.
So you're saying 100,000, he's saying 46?
No, he's saying 100.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm saying 46,000.
Oh. Yeah,
It's-
he gave that to me. That was a kind gesture as
It's
a host.
25,000, so I don't know
Whoa.
who is closer there.
I think Toby
I
won
think
that
it's
one.
Toby.
I think so.
And Gene,
Man, my ego's feeling good today.
I have one roll of church gear. Make Toby's ego go down. Gene, to tie it up, here we go. This is our final question, too.
Wow.
What happens if we tie? Because you had 7
Then we-
questions.
The
Thumb
win
wrestle.
goes to the guest.
Oh.
You can overdose on coffee. How many cups of coffee would you have to drink in a short span to overdose? Look,
But it's not true or false. There is an answer.
Gene, are you going to argue with goodhousekeeping.com?
I was born to argue with goodhousekeeping.com.
So you're both making a guess at how many cups?
Yeah. I'll let you go first, Gene.
All right, I'll say 47.
Okay.
I'll say 9.
It's 30.
Oh, Gene's closer.
All right, which means y'all tie, which really, if we're going to keep to this show spirit, means I lose because I made the game.
Should we arm wrestle to shut it down?
Sure. Yeah, you could totally arm wrestle. Well, Gene, we just appreciate you coming on, man. Is there anything you want to plug? I know we were already talking about Crew Brew, but we're not doing a tech takeaway this week. Gene's already, been on the show, earned his stripes. So what you want to plug?
I'm going to be at Philo this year, so if you want to...
Are you teaching a
little audio class?
Oh, that's amazing.
It'll probably be about vocal processing and reverb and things like that, but that's what we're figuring out. Yeah, come hang out.
All of our friends will be at Philo.
Philo is my favorite time of the year. Yes, so come to Philo this year. You'll see Gene. You'll see us. You'll see Todd Elliott. What else is there to see in life?
I know.
That's it.
Like, Gene and Todd are like production power couple right there.
Oh, man.
Oh, he is the... No, there's... Don't put me in that world.
All right. If you want to come to see Philo and the marriage of Gene and Todd, make sure you are signed up.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining, man.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for hanging out with us. We hope to see you back next week for more absurd stories, tech takeaways, and overall buffoonery here at the Church Gear Studios.
So, Blake, speaking of cat turd, I sure hope this episode didn't contain any cat feces.
Well, as the person who is the CCO, the chief cat poop operator at my house, I get it all out of the... my wife cooks, so I do the cat crap. It kind of makes sense. I know a thing or two about cat crap, and I can say there wasn't any in this episode.
And I wonder, have you looked like what percentage of people are dog people versus cat people? Because I think it's like 99-1.
I know it's the same correlation between intelligent people and dumb people. It's 99%, cats, 1% dogs.
It's kind of like how many people are Church Gear podcast people versus not Church Gear podcast people. I think it's like 99-1.
Well, if you want to be in the top 1% of our hearts, share this episode and tag Crew Brew and tag Church Gear, and the winner is going to get some Crew Brew coffee.
With no cat feces in it.
Allegedly. This statement has not been regarded by the FDA and is not responsible to the lawyers of Church Gear or Crew Brew.